Right then, let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast powered by MK Battery. As always, a huge thank you to MK Battery for their continued support of the podcast and of Powerchair Football across England. My name is Ryan Sipple, and this is part 2 of my conversation with Dan McLellan. When we were recording that first part just over a week ago, it quickly became clear it was too big to squeeze into one episode without cutting corners. So we decided to chunk it up. Part 1, episode 44, covers Dan's journey through club football, how it all started, the championship with Muscle Warriors, stepping in with Aspire, the standards, the expectation, and then all of those major moments on the big stages like the EPFA Champions Cup, the Club World Cup, and the WFA Cup. So if you haven't listened to episode 44, I'd really encourage you to go back and start there first, because it gives the full context for everything we're about to talk about today. Because this episode is where we properly focus on England. We'll talk about Dan's involvement in the pathway when England first started to feel like a realistic possibility, and how that transition actually happens from being around the environment, getting the call up, to suddenly finding yourself competing in major international competitions. Dan, welcome back. How are you?
Thank you very much. Lovely introduction. I'm good, thank you. Just been over a week since we last recorded, but I hope people aren't getting sick of me just yet, hopefully. But no, I'm looking forward to delving into it a bit more.
We recorded part 1 on the eve of your 17th birthday. How was the day itself? How did you celebrate?
Unfortunately, I had school in the day, which is always a bit of a killer on your birthday. But I got back from school, had my presents, and went out for a nice Nando's, which we were just saying, I don't think you can beat a Nando's on your birthday. So that was absolutely lovely, and just spending it with the family was really, really nice.
It sounds great. And just to your point about people being bored or hearing your voice once again, I will say that the response from the first episode has been incredibly overwhelming. I'm not sure how much has made its way to you, but the amount of messages that have been sent to me that came after part 1 was amazing. And that's a big reason I was so keen not to leave too much of a gap before picking this back up, because I know there's a lot of people who've been waiting patiently for that notification to drop saying part 2 is live. So let's talk about England, because you've played league football where consistency across 10 months or so really matters. You've played knockout football where one moment can make or break your hopes. You've played in European competitions where you're adapting to different styles and tactical problems. You've played on big stages on TV, St George's Park, Derby, and other big crowds, with which comes huge pressure and expectation. So in that sense, you're extremely well versed in all aspects of Powerchair football. But even with all of that experience, I think it's fair to say England is still a huge step up and something completely different. The level across the whole group is higher. The sessions are more intense, more detailed, and there is nowhere to hide. In the modern era of Powerchair football, almost when we went under the FA umbrella, your rise has not only been meteoric, it's been fairly unprecedented, because your progression and your ability has effectively fast-tracked you through the pathway and into the senior squad. And that makes it almost impossible for me to use you as my shining example for younger players that are either on the pathway or wanting to access the pathway, because it can create an incredibly unrealistic expectation, because most players don't, and shouldn't for that matter, be expected to move at the pace that you have. And that's why when I'm working in pathway environments, I often reference players like Dylan Kelsall and Tyler Reeve, players who've gone through every layer over a longer period, including the development squad, which you effectively skipped because you'd already established yourself before it was created. So with all that in mind, I want to jump back to the very start for a moment, back to 8-year-old Dan, as you referenced in part one, trying Powerchair football for the first time with Northampton, not immediately gelling with it in the first instance, not falling in love straight away, but from that second session onwards, slowly starting to get hooked. So from that point, when did England first become a thought? Not a target, just a possibility. When did it shift from something you watched to something you thought, maybe one day that can be me?
I think probably upon my first sort of season in the National League, because as soon as you start to get exposed to the idea of it, I think most people sort of get the idea in their head straight away, and I think I was pretty similar. Probably, yeah, when I was playing in the Championship with the Munster Warriors. Obviously, I think quite a few of the England players sort of coached at that time, as they still do now. So I think Chris was the West Brom Dudley coach who were in the Championship as well at that point. And so that was my first real exposure to seeing England players. And obviously I saw John Boulding at training as well. So I think, yeah, once I started playing a bit more seriously in the National League and got that exposure to the England internationals and did see that it was a real possibility, that was probably when I got the goal in my head and I said, right, maybe one day this could be a good aspiration. But it was never, I'm definitely going to get there. It was more, maybe that's like a real end goal and I'll be happy if I ever make it to the England squad.
Yeah, I think it's worth, we just set a bit of context, especially for those maybe listening outside England or even within England who aren't overly familiar with how the FA's England pathway actually works. So at its core, the pathway is made up of 4 levels. It starts with the Regional Emergent Talent Programme, or RETP for short, if we abbreviate. That then moves into the National Emergent Talent Programme, or NETP for short, followed by the England Development Squad, and ultimately the England Senior Squad. Each level just feeds into the one above it. So at any one time, you're looking at somewhere between 40 and 60 players across that pathway, all wanting to fight, all wanting to dream of having one of those very limited senior places. You touched on it briefly in part one, but focusing solely on that journey now, where did it start for you? Take me back to that first exposure of the pathway, those RETP sessions back in 2022, because to my recollection, from what I can remember, we had you for 2 or 3 RETPs in 2022. Then from 2023 onwards, you just skyrocketed your way up the pathway.
Yeah. So my first real exposure to the pathway at all was, as you say, those RETPs, and that was at Hatfield, in Hertfordshire Uni, and so yeah, that was with you, and I think Alex Dowding, I remember being there as well, and for me that was like a really big deal for me, because I think you've got to celebrate, especially when you're young. You've got to kind of celebrate every single achievement, and that felt like a massive first step. Even just getting onto the ladder felt like sort of, I think you've got to make, you can't get to the final step without taking the first step. So just getting on the pathway at all felt like a really big thing for me and a big opportunity. And so I was very excited about that when that opportunity came about, and I think I went into those RATP days wanting to prove myself, as I think probably everybody else did, because as you say, especially you said when you were talking about the senior squad, that you're always being watched and there's nowhere to hide. But I think that statement probably applies all the way through the pathway, because there's always members of staff around and people that are watching you. So I think you've got to be on it all the time, and it's such a big opportunity to prove yourself and show why you should be thought of as someone to go up to the next level, or just keep working on your trade and be seen as one of the stronger players in that group. That was always something that was on my mind, I think, because I knew that there was only one way to get up to the senior squad, and that was by trying to impress as much as I could at each stage.
You touched on it in part one that approaching 2023, you had a goal and aspiration of being part of the National Emergent Talent Programme, the step up from where you was in 2022. Did you ever actually attend any NETP sessions?
I did. I went to, I think, maybe, I want to say 3 and that was late 2022.
Yeah.
So there was I was in the RATP throughout sort of early 2022 until about, I think I had my last one in July, August time. And then I remember there was a selection day in September where I think as the sort of stronger players from each region, so the Midlands, the North and the South and RATP were there, and then some players that were currently in the NETP, and they sort of reselected the NETP and development squad. So you would go in there, and if it didn't go your way, or they felt you needed a bit more development, you'd stay in the regional pathway, and the aim was to sort of get into the NETP from there. And so I went to that day, and that went well. So I then went into the NETP from there, and that was September 2022. And then following that, there was NETP camps. I want to say I went to 2 or 3 from October to maybe like October to February. I think there was about 3 or 4 of those camps, and so there was quite a few of the I remember Ollie Crawshaw was in there at the same time as me, Tyler, Kyle, and I'm sure there was others that I missed out, but those are the few of the people that I remember from in there, and that was and a lot of those players were more experienced than me in terms of Kyle had already been in the senior squad, I think, at that point from the World Cup, so that was quite a big step up in terms of there's people. I'm now at the same level as some people have had senior squad experience, so that felt like a good opportunity, that NETP, and so I attended 2 or 3 of those camps at Lilleshall, and that was I think that was with Adam McAvoy. I might be wrong, but I think he was running the NETP at that time, and so that was a bigger step up, because you went from being sort of just in your region and in like a small pond, I guess, to then being thrown in with people and sort of the most promising players from all over the country. So it wasn't just in the South, it was then the best players from the North and the best players from the Midlands at that age group as well. So that was a big step up, but it was the whole way through. I sort of just, as I said about the RATP, I think I did have that mentality of wanting to use every step as a chance to show what I could do, and I eventually just keep progressing through the levels.
Yeah, so to complement the players that you've referenced, I think the NETP, which kind of now in 2023 is now what is kind of the England development squad. We've established one in between. It was yourself and Tyler Reeve, as you mentioned, Kyle Alexander, Ollie Crawshaw, Dan Rigby, Tom Kelly and Matt Gilbert was certainly the squad that travelled to Largs for the Development Home Nations. So we're in 2023, the year of the Sydney World Cup. You're selected as one of those 7 players in what was then, as you've referenced, Adam McAvoy's and Adam Crowell's England development squad. What was it like receiving the news that you'd be competing in an England shirt, albeit at development level?
That was really, really massive. We knew about it for 2 or 3 months before, so it was more of like a slow release excitement rather than you get the phone call and you're in sort of thing. But it was unbelievable because it's one thing training it and having the sort of one-to-one time with the coaches and the increased professionalism around it, but actually going and wearing the 3 lions and playing at a tournament for your country compared to doing training camps is such a big step up and a different thing. But it was a dream come true because I think anyone who's really into football representing their countries, it's always their dream. I think you could go down and ask anyone in the street and anyone that likes football. If you ask them if they like football and they say yes, then I can assure you they probably would have had aspirations of playing for England when they were a kid. So it felt like a dream fulfilled. Even though it wasn't the senior level, I didn't know at that point whether I would make it to senior level. So as I said, you've got to celebrate every single win you can get, and I think wearing the 3 lions, albeit at a development competition, was definitely felt like a big win to me.
Absolutely. You obviously impress in that environment, and this is obviously running concurrently with your league form with Aspire. We've spoken about how important 2023 was for you. That then leads to a call up into Colin Gordon's senior squad. You said that for the development home nations, you had plenty of notice. It wasn't a shock. But with these senior home nations happening, I think less than a month after the development home nations, I suspect that it was more of a shock. How did you find out that you'd been promoted or you were being trialed at senior level? And how did that news land with you?
Well, we got told that there was going to be one spot up for grabs for that tournament, the Senior Home Nations in Dublin, and any of us players in the development squad could get it, and it was up for grabs. So we were all playing obviously as a team and working for the team in Largs, but I think everyone knew that they wanted to impress and everyone wanted to get that spot. As much as we were all absolute friends and we were playing so well together, I think you'd be silly to assume that not everyone wanted to get that spot. So that was probably, I think, in the back of everyone's minds at that Largs tournament, just trying to impress because obviously Adam Crowell was there and he was the assistant to Colin, and I'm sure Colin was watching as well and watched the games. So we all knew that there was eyes on it, and this was probably the biggest chance you'd ever get to get into the senior squad anytime soon. So yeah, anyway, we knew that the one person was going to get in, but then I think it was about 2.5, 3 weeks after the tournament in Largs, and so I kind of assumed it's been 2 or 3 weeks. I guess I've probably not I've not got the spot, and I was a bit disappointed, but it was one of those things where I was still young, and I knew I had plenty of time, so I wasn't holding out any hope. But I obviously hoped I'd get in the squad, but it wasn't an expectation of, oh, I've got to do it now or I never will. I knew there'd be other chances, but yeah. So it had been 2 or 3 weeks. I thought the chance is probably over now. Someone else must have got it, and then just I expected to sort of hear about who had got it soon. But then my dad, he was actually out at the time, but then Adam Crowell gave my dad a call on the phone, and I think my dad shot home afterwards. And he ran through the front door and came and found me in my room and just said, "You never guess what? I've got a call from Crowley, and you're in." And that was yeah, probably still now my biggest news I've ever received in the sport, and it was such a crazy moment because it was a real moment of even just getting that call up, all my hard work for the 2 or 3 year period before that where I'd had that real tunnel vision on just trying to progress through the ladder and impress at every stage, that had finally paid off. And so it was a huge relief. And to be honest, shock, because as I said, I thought with that time period and with the fact that a lot of the other players were a bit more experienced, it probably wouldn't have been me that time and someone else would have had the chance. But to get it, and in that nature of the surprise after the it's sort of the disappointment of not getting it, and then the surprise then when I did was, yeah, incredible.
I assume due to the nature and the quick turnaround between the development home nations and the senior home nations, you didn't have an opportunity to train via a camp in between.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I literally we didn't even have training when we got out there. I just rocked up and I hadn't even really spoken to half the after I'd seen them around at nationals, but I was a little 13, 14-year-old kid, so I was a bit scared of everyone else because obviously I knew how much like of legends they were. So other than John and then Chris a little bit, I don't think I'd really spoken to anyone else at all. So I just rocked up and played from what I sort of knew. But I think I was I was kind of just freestyling it a little bit.
I'll tailor my question slightly because in my head I'm thinking there's no way that Dan didn't have a Lilleshall or a St George's Park camp, even if it was just a one-dayer before travelling out to Scotland once again to compete for England. So that is a shock to me. So my question is, what was it like going onto the court for the first time? I assume you had a kickabout. I assume you had some sort of training, some sort of preparation for the competitive games. How was it looking around, seeing Chris Gordon, Ed Common, Marcus Harrison? What was going through your head in that moment?
Even for me, it was actually the first time I saw them all was on the just I think I saw a couple of them on the ferry, and then the rest when we got to the hotel, and even just we all got our shirts for the tournament in the hotel in like a conference room the night before, and it was a nice little sort of initiation I felt for me, and everyone was, to be honest, everyone was so welcoming that I think they knew that I'd probably be a bit nervous, and they did such a good job at making me not feel like an absolute outsider. So everyone was really good about that. But honestly, I don't think you believe this, but I did not. We had no training before the kickabout. I literally my first time was literally getting on for a Scotland game on a Saturday morning. There was no training time or anything because it wasn't in Largs. It was in Dublin, so it wasn't like you get there on the Friday night. We just went straight to our hotel on the Friday, and then got to Sportsall for the first time on the Saturday morning. And so it was at a morning like a 10 o'clock kickoff, and I hadn't I'd never played with anyone really before other than John.
That's mind blowing. I forgot it was in Dublin. I was just assuming it was in Largs. Talk to me about the experience of the home nations then, competing at senior level, wearing the three lions. Just talk me through that. I bet it was incredible.
Yeah, it was a bit of a surreal experience because it was playing with idols for me, players that like in the past, John, Chris, Marks, and Ed had been the team that I'd watched at the previous Euros and in Troyes in the tournament earlier that year in 2022. And then I knew the quality of it was Dylan, Dave, and Lewis were also in there at the time when they came in. And I knew from playing against West Brom and watching West Brom Nationals how good they were. And they'd already been in the squad for almost a year, I think, at that point. I think they, in the summer of 2022, is when they came in. So they were a bit already sort of bedded in. But so yeah, I think there was I felt like a little bit of an imposter in the sense that they were also experienced and well versed within like playing these tournaments. I think as I said, they'd been to France, to Troyes, earlier that year and played against France and Denmark and Belgium. So they'd already all of those had already played together against some really top teams, and I was coming in, no tactics, just with a prayer. But I think, I knew that with how good they were, I didn't really need to know what was going on. They'll just get the ball and find me. And obviously, the play style in the development squad was we were trying to emulate what the senior squad do anyway. So I'm only really messing around when I say no tactics. Obviously, the principles and the ideas that we put into practice in logs of the development squad were very similar to what the senior squad were trying to emulate, but just the pace of the game is completely different. It's not the same playing that style of football with the development squad compared to playing it with the senior squad, because the ball contact, the decision making speed is just ridiculous.
Looking back now, knowing just how fierce the competition was for places in that World Cup squad, how did you assess your chances at that point, at the conclusion of the Home Nations? Did it feel like you still had a point to prove? There was still very much a decision in the balance? Or did you have a genuine belief that Sydney and the World Cup of Powerchair football was a real possibility?
I think we've got to take to the start of that Home Nations weekend. It was, I don't know if I'm ready for this. I'm getting thrown in the deep end a bit. I'm probably going to mess this up. But then if you ask, as you said, after the weekend, I want to be as authentic as possible. And I did feel like I had a real possibility because I felt like I played well at that. I think you can always sort of, you feel if you've played, you feel inside, you sort of, if you've played well or not. Did it feel good? Did you feel like you're making the right decisions? And I really felt like with the sort of limited training time I'd had and the limited experience I'd had playing in England's system, I felt like I'd sort of proved myself and, been able to help the team in that weekend. So obviously you've got like the people that were dead certs, like Ed, John, Chris, Marcus. They were absolute like dead certs that tournament, as they normally are. Then I think I knew that my spot was definitely anything but that. I felt personally like I'd done enough after that tournament, but it was kind of one of them where I couldn't argue if I did get dropped. It was one of them where I'm so young, and I just think I also knew in the back of my mind, as much as I felt like I'd done well at that tournament, how much of a big risk it is taking a young player like that to a tournament. Because as much as the Home Nations was my first senior tournament, the pressure there is high, especially the first tournament. But I don't think it's the same as a World Cup where there's so many more people there and the stakes are so much higher. People watching back home. So I think there was definitely that element of, are they going to take a risk on me? Do they think it's worth doing that, or would they rather take someone a bit more experienced and maybe a steadier hand?
Yeah, I mean, you're you're right to say all those things, but all of those elements aren't judged in a vacuum. As we touched on in part one, 2023 was just the perfect aligning of all the stars in your young power chair football career, winning the league with Aspire, winning the WFA Cup, um, as well as obviously your experience within those two home nations. So no, I think you're right to want certainly want one of those spots. I don't think you would ever expect one of those spots. Um, the call comes through. You're one of Colin Gordon's 8 players heading to the World Cup. Take me back to that moment. You said about how the call from Adam Crow into the development home nations was one of the most significant moments of your career. To be told that you're traveling to a major World Cup competition on the other side of the planet, where were you? Who are you with? How did you feel in that moment? Because getting selected for a World Cup is life changing at any age. Doing it at 13 or 14 is almost unheard of. Because under the FA banner, I would say with confidence, you're the youngest England player to ever attend a World Cup across any format.
So it's a funny one. Actually, people that are a bit closer to me at Aspire will know that my dad works at the school that I'm at, and so I was at in French class at the time that he got the call, but he then came and found me, and in a very innocent way, said, "Oh, I just need to speak to Dan. Could you go and drag him out of the class?" I came out into the corridor and he just told me the news and said, I've got a call. You got the call up." And obviously, I couldn't go too over the top because I was in a school corridor, but I was absolutely buzzing and felt like I was floating on clouds for the rest of the day. So yeah, that was it was a funny way to get the call in school in a French lesson, but it definitely made the French a bit less boring for the lesson.
Yeah, I can imagine it did. So now let's go to Sydney. This was the first World Cup to use a full round robin format. So 9 other nations, different styles every day, no easy games, no real opportunity to reset mentally, physically, emotionally, just constant intensity, constant adjustment, constant pressure. So before we get into all of the results, what was it like arriving in that environment, that kind of the plane over to Sydney, uh, arriving to the Olympic Park, checking into the hotel? Did the kind of the scale, the pace, the expectation hit you straight away, or did it kind of take a few days to sink in? Because I know there was a little bit of adjustment to allow for jet lag and stuff. So you probably had 4 or 5 days before the competition started to soak up the atmosphere.
I think on the flight, it felt like a normal flight. Obviously it was very long, but I wasn't thinking about the end goal at that point. I was just trying to get through it, get a bit of sleep, watch a few films. But then when we got to the hotel and I saw a few of the French team and the Irish team and all the different countries, then seeing those players who I'd only ever seen on screens before was probably when the magnitude of what was about to happen hit me. Because it's like when you meet a celebrity, they were like celebrities to me, in that I'd only ever seen them on a screen and I'd idolized them, the likes of the French and some of the American players at that time. So yeah, it did hit me kind of. I think when we actually arrived on the complex, when we went to the hotel and then went down and looked around the hall, and I was just seeing so many familiar faces that they wouldn't have known me, but I'd seen them before plenty of times online. So yeah, that was a bit overwhelming, to be honest, in the sense that there's that information overload. I'm seeing so many new people and so many people that I've always wanted to meet. So yeah, it was a bit of a whirlwind that first few days. But then by the time the tournament came, I think I'd just about got over that shell shocked sort of feeling of meeting all those people and got myself focused for the tournament.
You was 14 at that point, am I correct?
Yeah, 14.
So my question is kind of, how did you feel you handled it emotionally? Was it nerves, excitement, pressure, or did you almost feel free because you were just throwing yourself into this new experience?
I felt I think the jet lag hit me for the first few days. I didn't really feel anything. But then once that sort of settled, I did feel nervous. Especially for the opening game, I felt really nervous. And I knew we'd had a bit of training before, but we were all a bit off the pace because of the jet lag and the fact that we hadn't been in our chairs for a month. So that made me a bit more nervous. But I think I knew it was natural for there to be nerves. And as much as it was a very new experience playing in the magnitude of event and in a different country, I sort of tried to tell myself that it was no different to playing in a big cup final. And that's the thing. I had a couple of experiences of big games, like that league decider with West Brom and the cup final, and even the Home Nations final. And I think you've got to try and draw upon those past experiences as much as you can, because the only way you're going to get better at dealing with things is by repeating them. So if I could kind of convince myself that I'd done something similar before, that might have helped. But no, of course I was definitely nervous for the start of the tournament, and then that kind of subsided. as the week went on. But yeah, I think even if you asked Chris or John, Marcus or Ed, anyone that's been there at 3 or 4 tournaments already, I think they would all tell you that they still get nervous. I know like, I certainly still get nervous for every game. So I don't think that feeling ever goes away, and I think you've got to just embrace it rather than trying to tell yourself that you're not nervous, because that only creates more.
I'm interested in your view on the round robin format, because for me, that was one of the most exciting aspects of the competition, whereby every country tested themselves against every other country. How did you experience it? Would you prefer fewer games with more recovery time? Or if you're traveling to the other side of the world, do you want to play as much football as possible? Because I can understand there is some negatives associated to round robin formats in terms of an organisation and point of view, the turnaround of games, rest times, etc. Um, but for me, it just made that competition.
No, I completely agree. We've spoken about this quite a lot in the group. 'Cause obviously, as everyone will know, there's going to be a World Cup this year in Argentina, and we were just we spoke a few months ago what format would we prefer, and I think it was fairly unanimous that we liked round robin, because we all absolutely love playing our football and playing with each other, and so if you're there, you want to play everyone and you want to make the most of it. There's no point. I don't think any of us enjoy sitting around and sort of doing nothing. We want to be on the pitch all the time, and so I really like that. And I think as well, we're a team that sort of analyzes previous games really well. We've got a lot of really people with really keen eyes for detail, and um, looking back and sort of making tactical structural changes to what we did. And I think that was proven in the 2019 Euros before I came in, with the group stage loss to France, then obviously beating them in the final. And I think we did it again at that tournament. And although I know we lost to penalties in the end, still the improvement in performances against France and USA in the later stages compared to the group was night and day. So I think for us as a country, it's really beneficial, and I can't really see why any country wouldn't want to do that, because you get a chance to play against every single team. I don't think I would want to walk away from that tournament saying we didn't even get to play against 3 or 4 of these teams, and we might not ever get to. I think that was perfect the way it was, and you really get into a rhythm of just wake up, 2 games, you know who you're going to play, you've got the 2 games, and you just get into a routine. And as much as it's a little bit tiring, I think when it's something you enjoy, you don't really get burnt out from it quite as much.
You alluded to the opener against Argentina, and you spoke about nerves going into that fixture. That ended 2-1 to England. You scored both goals in a huge opening win. I won't break down it. We don't have to break down every single game of the competition, but I want you to recall your memories from that one, because we speak so much about things that rank so highly within your Powerchair football career. Again, this is another moment that's got to be right up there.
Yeah. Yeah, that was ridiculous. I never felt like as a team we played at our best in that game. And we really felt that at the time, probably more than we do now, because we just didn't know, with it being 6 years since the last World Cup, we didn't see Argentina as being such a threat. After that game, we had the opinion of maybe that was a few days later, once they got to semi-finals, or even when they were knocking on the door of getting to semi-finals, we thought actually maybe that wasn't so bad a result after all. But at the time, it felt like we went into the game thinking there should be a convincing win based on their previous placement at the last World Cup. So we were disappointed with the performance, and I felt like I maybe could have made more of an impact in the game. But at the end of the day, the score and the goal is what matters. So yeah, we were really just glad to get a win in the opening game. And it couldn't have gone too much better than it for me personally. So to have that moment, and with my family, my brother, my mum, and my dad to all be there watching it as well was something really, really special.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the performance that put Argentina on the map. And we're going to go on later in the episode to talk about the Euros in Italy last year and how Italy announced themselves on the international stage. There was a lot of similarities there. And doing my prep for this episode, I went back to just watch the game and look at elements around the game. And we ran a predictor app before every fixture of that competition. And I think it was a 92% public vote in favour of an England win. So, yeah, I don't disagree that England didn't play their best necessarily, but teams rarely do in game one. But don't discredit the role of Argentina in that scenario, because we've seen what they've gone on to do since, both in terms of as a country, club level, with Tigres de Pacheco at the Club World Cup, Valentino Zegarelli coming over to England and impressing thoroughly. So there's no better way really to kickstart a competition with a win. And in the fullness of time now in 2026, how big a win that actually was, because come round to Argentina in later on this year when they're hosting the next iteration, they have aspirations of lifting that trophy. So it shows the arc that they've kind of been on. From a football point of view, talking about the World Cup as a whole, what stood out most to you about the opposition? I mean, facing 9 different nations, different tactical approaches, different interpretations of the game. Was there a particular team or style that really challenged or surprised you? And just your assessment of the whole competition.
I'll highlight 2 to be honest. And number 1 is, this is a bit of a cheap one, so that's why I'm doing 2, is Argentina, because I know we've already spoke about them. But as I said, we really didn't go into that game expecting a really sort of scrappy, close game. But they were just, yeah, so well organized, so passionate, so aggressive, and they kind of suffocated us at times. And that wasn't what we expected, but it was a real reminder of that lesson of never go into a game thinking you've won it. You're only as good as your next performance. So I think that was definitely a reminder for the rest of that tournament. You can't take any game for granted, because with the fact that there was limited footage of them, we had completely just let them slip under the radar. We were looking at, the teams that we thought might get sort of semi-finals, other than the typical big 3 of us and USA and France, with probably Denmark, Australia, maybe Uruguay. I don't think that was for me anyway. And yeah, as a group, we just didn't expect Argentina to be as strong as they were. But yeah, as you said, we'll speak about them later, but they really kicked on from them. And then my other team would be the US, because in terms of surprise package, because yeah, I know they were really strong, obviously, for many years, even before I started playing. Like twice they won the World Cup, and then to get just about losing the final in the one in Florida in 2017. They obviously were a great team, but the way they played was so different at the World Cup. So I'd never sort of thought of them as too much of a set piece team. From what the footage I'd watched in the 2017 World Cup of the final, they were kind of more of a physical open play team. So then getting to that World Cup, watching the opening game against, I remember very vividly that they were playing the opening game against Australia. So we got to watch that before we went and played our game against Argentina later in the afternoon. And it just was not what I was expecting at all. I knew they'd probably win, but they absolutely battered Australia. I want to say it was 5-0 off, maybe 5-1. And they scored 2 or 3 unbelievable set piece goals. I don't remember for sure, but I want to say they definitely did 1 or 2 of the American corners. And I think there was Pete and Riley had one of their boom booms in there as well. So that was a big shock in terms of wow, this is the best I've seen any team ever execute set pieces. They're doing things that for us, when we try them, it's like a 2% chance of working. But for them, it's like Arsenal in the Premier League now with their corners. They get one and their fans are already singing boomstick, boomstick. So yeah, it was a real shock just seeing how proficient they were from those set pieces.
I think the most telling thing is probably the legacy of that USA style and performance, because we've seen it influence the game here in England significantly at domestic level, and how important set pieces are for the sport now. And again, we'll talk about England and the Euros, but the percentage increase in their set piece goals has been significant. And that's something that just wowed audiences. The power generated by Pete Winslow, the receivers in Riley Johnson, Jordan Dickey, and others. It was amazing. At the fear of making you repeat yourself, thinking back now, was there a game in that tournament that stands out as your favourite? Not necessarily result, but one where you felt maybe most proud of your performance or impact?
It'll actually probably be the game on the second or third day against Denmark. Because we were really struggling to break them down. I'd started off in that game. And yeah, we were really struggling to break them down. I think I came on just before half time or maybe at half time. And then 5 or 6 minutes into the second half, the ball got played out and I managed to stop the ball through like quite a small gap across to Marcus on the other side. And that kind of opened up the game. Then we were able to get a goal shortly after. And that sort of settled the game for us. So to come on and not be the match winner, but to set up the match winner was a really nice nice moment. And I probably felt prouder about that than the Argentina game, just because we were in a really sticky situation and I managed to sort of open up the game and help us have a little bit of creativity.
We all know how the competition ended. That heartbreaking penalty shootout, defeat to France. And in that moment, for everyone, the hurt was obvious. But with a little bit of distance now, how do you reflect on that final and the tournament as a whole? Does it still sting when you think of how close we came, or does the pride in what the group achieved and experienced outweigh that?
No, look, it definitely does sting. I was so young at the time and obviously probably quite emotional compared to everyone else. But everyone was so upset after that final, and because we all had that real joint belief that we could do it. So it was, I was so sad for like ages afterwards, that tournament. When we got back, even into England, I was gutted. But obviously, you get over it with time, and other things come up for you to focus your attentions on. But obviously, it's a mixed feeling. I felt pride, and I think the lads in the final did really well. But it wasn't to be. So I don't think you can spend too much time kind of ruin your previous mistakes. And I think we got up and sort of dusted ourselves off quite quickly afterwards and went forward and focused on the next. Because obviously, I know we didn't have a tournament for a while, but it's all just, once you have one of those tournaments, it just becomes all about then getting ready to go for the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. I can speak from the perspective of a commentator calling it alongside your brother, and how we was just so deflated. We have a duty to professionalism, to the production, but we're English. We want England, and yeah, that penalty shootout was a very cruel way to win it, to lose it. Sorry, but I think it wouldn't be unfair to say France deserved that World Cup. They were sensational from the first whistle on the first day all the way through to that final. So they showed why they are the benchmark at international level, and they've done so at club level as well. So that's why we will put some attention and some work into later on this year. Let's fast forward to 2025, and we're preparing for the EPFA Nations Cup. First of all, talk to me about the period between Sydney and just before the Nations Cup in Italy, the camps, and also talk to me about the experience of Team USA coming over for that week and how valuable that was for you and for them, for that matter.
It was definitely a period of a lot of change, is how I would describe it after that World Cup. Obviously, everyone knows that Colin and Adam Crowell were relieved of their duties after that World Cup, and that led to a bit of a period of things being up in the air for all of us, in the sense of obviously they were looking for a replacement, so we had interim coaches, I guess, and so the 2024 Home Nations we went to with Ryan Davies and Rob Seal from the FA, and they did their best by us, but they were kind of omitted to us, and it was one of them where they didn't have that specialised sport knowledge because it is such a niche sport. You can't sort of go from being a mainstream football coach and suddenly just pick up being an elite Powerchair football coach in one day. It does you need to be exposed to the sport for a while to really understand all the ins and outs of it. So we were kind of left in a tricky situation for a while where we didn't have the level of coaching that we wanted. But then obviously, I don't know exactly what month it was. I think it was early maybe like late 2024, the summer of 2024, maybe August, September. Then Maka came in, so that was nice in the sense that we felt like we had someone obviously sport specific again, and someone with the knowledge of working around Powerchair football for however long he has. I know he's definitely been around way longer than I have in this sport. So yeah, that gave us sort of that drive of we've now got a permanent, after having so many different sort of coaches in the interim of finding a new coach, we finally had something a bit more concrete and permanent. And that was, I think, then when Maka came in was when we really got our heads down. We didn't have to worry about the coaching anymore. We could just focus on trying to win the Euros. So yeah, Maka kind of came in and tried to lay out his principles and what he wanted from us as early as possible. A lot of which was set piece driven, as you said and referenced earlier, in terms of, I think, I want to say maybe a few months before the Euros, he showed us the FA had done some analysts of the FA had done some statistics work, and he showed us pie charts with all of the percentages of the goals we'd scored at the World Cup and at all the previous tournaments, and where they were. So there was like a pitch heat map of where the goals were from and how many were from open play and how many were from set pieces. And I can't remember the exact numbers. It was a while ago now, but all I remember is that it was very, very imbalanced in terms of it was pretty much all open play goals. I don't think we scored hardly any set pieces. So it wasn't, I don't want people to get the wrong idea. It wasn't, let's become America and go as over the top as they have done, maybe, in terms of wanting to play the set piece style. Because I don't think we do have the ability that they have with someone that can do those peak window kicks. I don't think anyone really, bar Noel Zoran, in the whole world does. Or not that I've seen anyway. But it was it's not about decreasing the number of open play goals we score, it's just about increasing the number of set piece goals we score. So it wasn't, let's go from 20 open play goals and 5 set piece goals to 10 and 10. It was more, let's keep the 20 open play goals and then get up to 10 set piece goals. So that was the key message, I think, being a bit more efficient and having two ways of playing, because we've always known that when we're at our best, we kill teams in open play, but then they could always just knock it out for us, a kick in or a corner against us, and maybe we wouldn't be as strong, but or even give way at 2-on-1. We wanted to be that team where they don't know what to do because it's an open play, we kill them, and then if they knock it out, we also try and kill them and be more efficient with the set pieces. So I think that was a lot of what the focus was, and then just reinstilling our in-play principles because, as I said, it had been a long time since we'd had that sport-specific coaching, and I think we probably got a bit rusty with those principles. As much we'd all been trying to stay in touch and keep talking about them, but we weren't having as much exposure to them maybe as we had before, just because of the lack of sports specialized coach. So and I'm saying all this in a very grateful way because it must have been hard for Rob and Ryan, and I think they were kind of thrown into the deep end in that they went from having very little experience in the sport, maybe just a bit of RETP, and then having to try and coach players who've been playing for years and all these big global, international and European tournaments must have been difficult for them. But they were good in the sense that they kind of let us take the reins and work on what we felt like we needed to work on. And I think we gave them a good education of the sport, and I think they definitely would know a lot more now than when they first stepped in with us. So that's a positive thing. And yeah, so it was a period of change, but as I said, under Maka we started to get a bit of routine back, and then we had the Home Nations in Largs in May, and we won that. I don't think we conceded one goal, and we scored plenty of goals. Plenty of them were set piece goals. Won the tournament without too much of a struggle, and that was exactly what we aimed to do in that tournament. Sort of set out a warning because those teams were all going to be at the Euros as well. That this is what we're going to do, and this is the intensity we want to play at. So that was a positive, and then obviously, as you said, I make reference to the USA camp in July as well, which was we'd done something similar with Ireland in July 2023, but it was so different in that we play against them every year, whereas this was quite a sort of something that had not been done before in the sense that we're inviting a team from across the globe, and a really elite team for that matter, to come over, and they were obviously preparing for their Copa America, which was in November, and we were preparing for the Euros. And yeah, we just had a week we both had individual training and then came together for a friendly behind closed doors on the Friday night. Some mixed team games on the Saturday, and then, as everyone probably I'm sure would have tuned into or come along to the big showcase game on Sunday.
Going back to some of the stuff you've been saying, can you kind of summarize quickly how the coaching styles have differed, moving from Colin Gordon and Adam Crowell to Adam McAvoy and Craig Peaty, and what the kind of the differences are?
I think every single manager that you get will have a very different approach on how they do things, whether that's about how involved they are in training sessions, how involved they are in matches, how they want certain things done, what they believe like the right match day routine is, anything like that. I just think I think tactically they want to do the same things, and their goals tactically align. But Colin was a real someone who paved the way in terms of that. He's got a great football mind, and he paved the way in the sense that he created 4 out, and obviously was brave enough to get to do that in an era where everyone was playing a goalkeeper on the goal line all the time. And so I think he was a pioneer in that sense, but I don't think Mac has come in and said, you know what, scrap that, that's all rubbish, I want to do it my own way. He's very much acknowledges that that's a positive foundation to build upon, but I think he also then, as I said, he saw the big gap in the market, if you like, for us to be the lack of set piece threat. So I think that's probably the difference. Like Maka probably wants things to be more direct, whereas Colin was probably more about patterns of play, repetition, and it doesn't have to. It doesn't matter if it's 15 passes or 3 passes. It's got to be a goal. Whereas for Maka, it's about efficiency. I think. Can we win a set piece and score? Can we? If we got the choice between doing it in 2 passes or 10, we'll take the 2 every single day to minimize the chance of mistakes. So I think that was one big difference I've noticed. And I think the other thing was in terms of in games, and you see this in the Premier League as well. You've got Mikel Arteta, who's at the edge of his touchline, basically on the pitch in some games. And you've got other managers who choose to sit in their dugout and be less vocal. I think Colin, you always heard him on the stream shouting, giving people their cues, and he was a lot more probably verbal in the games. Whereas I think Macca's more of someone where he'll sit and he'll be a bit more pensive and thinking about what's going on, and then give you a shout to come over, and then quietly give you the information, rather than, I don't think he's someone who's constantly feels the need to be shouting instructions. And I think that's very much a personal preference thing. That it was the same with the players. There's some players who are always talking, and there's other quieter players like Chris, who he always says this. He knows he's always communicating from the back. You never hear Chris not talking in a game, and then Ed never says anything. So it's just one of them where it's doesn't mean one's better than the other, or it doesn't really affect who they are as players, but it's just the way people are. And maybe I don't know who can say why it is, but yeah, those are kind of the 2 main differences I've noticed. And I'm sure if you asked the other lads in the senior squad, we'd all say different things. But I think that's one of the things with coaching. It's very much you have a personal relationship with the manager, and you probably pick up different things from them.
No, it's fascinating to hear, because they are very different personalities. They both have different kind of ideologies, different ways they want to play. But you're very much right to say that Colin was the pioneer for the 4-out system, and that's kind of the foundation and the philosophy that everything is built on now within the England pathway. So it's played a very important role. Early on with England, you've spoken about wanting to prove yourself, trying to show you belong, trying to earn the trust of your coaches and teammates, learning where you fit into the equation. But going into Italy, for me, and I'm sure you can give me your own opinion, it felt different, because you weren't arriving as a young developing player with potential. You were arriving as someone established, someone coaches and teammates trust, someone expected now to influence games, and that brings a very different kind of pressure. Before the tournament even started, what were the expectations like within the group? Going in as reigning champions, it felt for some like there was almost a non-negotiable sense, both internally and externally, that England were expected to come home with the trophy. How did you experience that build-up?
Yeah, I think everything was around winning. We spoke so much about how we were going to win, and the fact that we were going to win, that we just went in and we knew we had to win. We really, really felt like it was our time, and we wanted to, after the World Cup falling just short, we wanted to go out and prove why we are the reigning Euros champions. So I don't think there's any doubt in any of our minds. And obviously, with you being from England as well, as much as you're a neutral commentator, you would have heard a bit from our camp up in the lead up to the tournament that was our sort of mindset. And as you said, it didn't feel like there was much uncertainty. I think everyone was quite aligned in their goal that we wanted to win. And so obviously everyone will know that it didn't pan out that way, but I don't think I'll ever be happy if I'm not going into a tournament with England with the expectation of winning.
And when the tournament got going, firstly, what do you think worked well for England? And on the flip side, what did you find most challenging, either kind of personally or collectively?
Um, I think I'll start off, I think positive. I think we didn't really let the pressure that, like, as you say, teams don't play well in the first game. But I don't think we really struggled too much in the first game. And I think we played well in that game. And that fast start obviously gives you momentum. And obviously, we scored 3 or 4 set pieces in that game as well, which, as we referenced, that was exactly what we've been trying to do more, get more set piece goals in. So I think that was a real positive. And I think throughout the whole tournament, we had a really big threat from both corners and free kicks around the box, which we maybe lacked a little bit in previous tournaments. And then I also think the way we conducted ourselves as a team as well, we had a real togetherness between the group of 8 players. And like, obviously in every team there's going to be players that want to play and feel they should be playing more, or unhappy with their own performances or decisions that have been made by coaches or whatever. But it really felt like we had a team that was all on the same page, and a team that was all quite united. So that was, and we all were working towards the same goal. So I think that was, on a social level and with set pieces, there was some real positives from the tournament. But then on the more negative side, I think we struggled to, teams sort of set up in really, really low blocks against us. And we did struggle a little bit with adapting to that. And as much as we tried, after every single game, we went back and we watched loads of footage. We were stopping every few seconds and analysing micro nothingness details. And it just couldn't get it to work for whatever reason. We really tried to strip it back to the basics. We tried to analyse every team really well, and we just couldn't figure out a way to get around the low block that teams were playing. And that's something we've already done a bit of work on since we've been back from the Euros in our 3 or 4 camps. And we're at camp from Sunday evening to Tuesday this week as well. So I'm sure that'll be a continued theme, because that's how teams are going to play against us now. So we need to adapt and learn. We can't have every game being really tight. But with that being said, I do actually want to say that I think it's completely different games in that tournament if we score early. And that is really something that people won't, maybe people that could just watch the game quite casually and don't look into the detail and look a bit deeper than just the final score, or they just watch the game once and assume, oh, it was a bad performance. But in so many of the games where maybe we weren't as clinical, or just couldn't get that final product, the end product, the pass or the final shot quite right, there could have been, like, the semi-final is a good example to reference. It ended up being 1-0 and like a really late extra time goal. But really, we had the chances. If we scored one of those early chances in the first half, we just had the chances to win that game 4 or 5-0. So I felt like maybe in 1 or 2 of the games, like the Ireland game especially was the one, and maybe the Denmark game, I felt like we actually didn't create that much. But then when you look at that Belgium game, I think once we did do that analysis near the end of that tournament in that Belgium game, we did create so many chances. And in most of the games, if we score in the first 10 minutes, we probably do make it easy, because then teams can't just set up to spoil the game for us. They have to actually come out and play. So yeah, I think that's the big thing, being clinical early on and then forcing teams to come at us, because I think that's when we'll play through them and really hurt them.
The visibility of the sport is so much greater now than it was 3, 5, 10 years ago. with the live streams, social media, YouTube, community forums, with all of that comes public opinion. People share their views more openly, and I'm sure you all across that competition received some of that feedback. And when the performances weren't perfect, we saw things turn a little bit more negative than we've ever really experienced before from an English perspective. With that in mind, did you feel the weight of expectation from home, and how did you manage that pressure internally, again, individually or collectively, because it was very unique?
Um, no, I definitely felt that weight of expectation because that's what you're doing it for the people back home and for the whole. You're not just playing for yourself or just for the 8 people there. You do sort of play for the whole country and the pride of everyone back home. So you've got to take their opinions on board. I'm not saying everyone should go around saying like ridiculous, horrible things, but I don't think I really saw much of that. I think I just saw people frustrated. Like, I personally try not to get sort of caught up in too much of the online stuff, but I did, like, obviously some of the lads were speaking about it, and I saw some myself. If I was watching clips of the game back, you see the YouTube chat, and so I could see people weren't happy, and it didn't really come as a surprise because we knew we weren't happy. And so if we're not happy, how can we expect people back home to be happy? And they hold us to very high standards, and we hold ourselves to high standards. So as much as it's not what you want to hear, that you're disappointing people, I don't think anyone's doing anything wrong. I think we just didn't perform to the level that we should have in that tournament. I think sometimes people maybe go a bit far, picking out individual players or picking apart performances where maybe they overreact. But we want our game to get to the level of mainstream football, and players in mainstream football get hundreds of hate comments every single game. So it's just something that comes with the sport. And as much as maybe people aren't using the platform always to say nice things, as long as it's not hateful comments and it's just constructive criticism or just honest reflections of what the game was, I think that's only going to help the profile of the sport build. And if we're going to be offering those platforms for people to have their opinions, we can't be shocked and disappointed when people aren't happy with us. So yeah, I understand where people were coming from, and I think I would have been frustrated if I was back home watching that as well. But with that as well, I think the best thing to do when you're away at those tournaments is you've got to just be in your own little bubble. I think the minute you think about all the people watching it back home and what everyone's going to be thinking of it and all of those sort of factors, you really start to feel the pressure more. When you just think about the people that are there with you at the tournament and you don't think about anything other than that, you just focus on the group of people you're with, the hall you're in, the task at hand. I think that makes it a lot more manageable. I think as soon as you think of the 300 people watching it on the live stream, or your grandparents, everyone in the chat, as soon as you start thinking that in the game, you're finished. You can't do that. It makes the game so much bigger than it needs to be, and I think it distorts your sort of perception of reality because you can't worry about who's watching it online. You've got to just focus on what the here and now and the present, and playing it like a normal game of football. Because at the end of the day, it is just a normal game of football. But unfortunately, you've got a few more people watching you and a bit more pressure on you. So yeah, my sort of way I've gone about it with everything has always just been focus on playing the football game and don't worry about people saying nice things. Don't get too high when people say nice things about you, and don't get too low when people aren't happy with the performances.
Yeah, I've spoken about this on a number of occasions with John Balding, with others. And from my perspective, firstly, there was no hate, there was no toxicity around the comments. When I say there was negative comments, that's probably just relative to what we've experienced in the past. But as mentioned, the visibility of our sport, the professionalism of our sport, the status of our sport is skyrocketing at the moment. And with that, to your point, if we want to be akin to the professional running game, it does come with levels of scrutiny and expectations. There is players being held to a higher standard, certainly when you're going in as the holders. So in almost a backwards way, I see it as a positive for our game. I see it almost as a badge of honor that there is so many people now, hundreds to your point, that are so invested in the end outcome that they're going to share their opinions, just like it happens within the Premier League, the Championship, and other levels of the professional running game. So no, to all of your points, I was monitoring all of the comments on YouTube throughout the commentary of the competition, and it was nice to see that level of investment where other countries aren't quite there yet because there isn't that expectation, but you wouldn't want it any other way. Um, uh, Similar to the question I asked you with regards to the 2023 World Cup, think back now, was there a game or opponent in particular that stands out as your favourite? Because there was some really good opposition, but you didn't get to face everyone, of course, because it was split into two groups.
I I think I would say Belgium just because it was a new opposition. They were I think I'm right. Them in Italy. Actually, no, I'm gonna go with Italy. I'm gonna go with Italy. I was gonna say Belgium because obviously they were a new team, but Italy were also a new team and they gave us a hell of a run for our money. So I'll go with Italy just because obviously it was like sort of a later game in the evening under the lights. They had drums and it was really loud. The atmosphere in the hall was really good and
Just on that point, is that the loudest fixture you've ever been a part of?
mm, probably yeah, just the acoustics of the hall and the drum was really loud.
Yeah, just like we referenced Argentina earlier, this was the performance that announced Italy as almost a powerhouse on the international stage, going 1-0 up against the European holders, when before the tournament, not many people had given them much hope of achieving anything. I mean, I'd commentated on two former international competitions that featured Italy in 2022 and 2023. And with all due respect, they were nowhere near the level to threaten teams like England and France and others. But what we saw in September of last year was just the most remarkable uh, series of performances, both individually and collectively. And I'm so happy that they've earned one of those valuable tickets to the World Cup, because I can only imagine what they'll be like on the road when they bring that passion to South America. You looking forward to that one?
Yeah, I am. Italy versus Argentina. I cannot wait. Think fireworks guaranteed for that one.
So again, the conclusion of the competition, not overly favourable to England, and there is an element of we could have or should have done better than we did. But again, we have to commend the efforts of France, who once again, as they are so often, completely faultless at international level. I mean, watching every one of their games in Italy of last year, um, it amazes me some of the things they're able to do, the level of performances, the tactics, the techniques, everything. And they will be the favourites approaching this year's World Cup. So I want to jump ahead now to Buenos Aires and October, a World Cup, by the way, which without question will be the most competitive iteration we have ever had. With all of the qualifiers now wrapped up, we have the confirmed 10. So England, France, Italy, Belgium, Denmark, USA, Argentina, Uruguay, Australia, and Japan. So if that doesn't excite people, I really don't know what will. How amazing a lineup is that, Dan? I mean, in competitions in the past, there's been lesser nations. I know Canada were in Florida. I know the Irish team struggled in Sydney. But when you look at that list, it is the complete unknown. I know you can typically predict the top 3, maybe 4, but beyond that, it's up for grabs for anyone.
Yeah, that is an absolute joke of a list, to be honest. You don't know where your first points are coming from there, do you? It's there's literally no win is guaranteed with those teams. Where, as you say, there has been a couple of weaker teams at the past few tournaments where you back yourself to get a win. Maybe if you're not playing even at your best, but with the teams at this World Cup, you're gonna have to be at your best every single game. I don't know. I honestly couldn't predict it because I think there's such a high concentration of good teams all around a similar level that will just, I think it'll be like a flip of a coin where you never know who's going to beat who. So yeah, I think for the neutrals, it's going to be like probably the best Powerchair football tournament to view ever.
I certainly hope so. One thing that's always become apparent with Powerchair football is how few foregone conclusions there actually are. With the unpredictability, the squad changes, role changes, competition for places so intense, nothing is ever guaranteed. And I know you well enough now to know you won't take anything for granted. You won't feel like you're owed one of those spots on the plane to Buenos Aires. So that puts a lot of emphasis on what's to come next. The remainder of the domestic season, international camps and competitions, most notably the Home Nations, and you'll have a very high bar that you want to maintain, continuing to perform, improve, show consistency over the next 6 months or so. So from where you sit right now, how do you approach that period mentally, balancing confidence in what you've already done, the fact that you're already established in the England team, with the hunger to keep improving and lock down your place for Argentina?
I think with leading up to the big tournaments, obviously now I've had sort of 2 goes at it, a bit of experience. I think you've really just got to not overthink it. Like, you've clearly done enough to be in the sort of in the shot of the selection process in the first place. So I don't think it's worth changing anything for the selection. I think you've got to show up for the final few camps before selection and play like you normally do. Like, obviously, you might have a terrible session in one of the camps, but then you keep sticking with your normal process and doing what you normally do, and it will pay off, I think. So I think when the time's right, you do get the selection, and as long as you just be yourself, because it isn't just about pure footballing ability. And that's, I think, maybe the slight misconception that people sometimes have. You can't just pick your 8 best technical players to go to a major tournament. You've got to think about classification, positions, sort of personalities in the team, ages. Like, you don't want 8 of the same player, and you pretty much will never ever take the 8 best most technically gifted players to a tournament, because it is just so much more than that comes into it. And also, people also don't always see what goes on behind the scenes. You might have a player that goes to National League and performs really, really well, but then they get the call up to an England camp or a few England camps, and they just maybe can't replicate it under that slightly higher level of scrutiny and pressure. So I think sometimes I'd compare it to the people that Harry Maguire used to always get picked for the England squad in the running game, and people would say, "Oh, but there's better centre backs," things like that. But clearly, he must have been doing something behind the scenes in training, and he always showed up for England in the big games. So it's about having that personality and that balance, as well as just the best 8 players. So I just try to be myself and be a good teammate to others, and try and kind of be as mature as I can, because I think that also helps you to feel more confident in your selection rather than just purely basing it off how you're playing.
Yeah, I completely agree. In England, we have this incredible infrastructure. We have the backing of the FA and everything that stems from that, the standards, the resource, the visibility, the long-term thinking and planning. On top of that, we have the most comprehensive joined up talent pathways in the sport, a pathway that isn't about participation, it's about nurturing talent properly over time with the clear aim of making sure that when England step onto the court at major competitions, they have the tools, they have the belief and the ability to go all the way. And for me, winning a World Cup feels like the final piece of the puzzle because of what it could unlock, the attention it brings, the credibility it cements, the step it represents towards pushing powerchair football further into the mainstream sporting conversation cannot be understated. So when you think about the possibility of England winning a World Cup, what do you think it represents and what could it do for the group and for the sport as a whole?
I think it will represent sort of the massive growth in the sport in this country in the last 10 years, and the development in the investment in it, and the equipment as well. But I think the main thing it will do is bring more eyes to the sport and incentivize big firms, big businesses to invest in this sport, because you see here about a World Cup winning team, and who wouldn't want to invest in that? So I think, as you say, it will add credibility in terms of if we can go as a country to firms and say, and the WFA can say, well, the players playing in our league have just won the World Cup. I think it's only going to help the infrastructure in this country, because that's such it's a proposition that I think not many big businesses would turn down to invest in. So and obviously, if people think, oh well, England haven't won, the running team haven't won the World Cup for years, and this powerchair team's just gone and done it, it's also going to bring more eyes to our sport, because everywhere I go and around school, people always sort of, a lot of the time, people ask me about the sport because they've seen it on my social media, or they've heard about it just from one of my friends or something, and no one's heard of it. And so I think the only way that it's going to gain more exposure, and you're going to go out on the streets and people are going to know what powerchair football is by winning the World Cup, and then getting the more eyes on the sport. Because I'd say, you've got something like wheelchair rugby is obviously probably the biggest para sport, I'd say, in terms of most people would roughly know what it looks like and have maybe watched 1 or 2 games before. But it's not really the case of powerchair football currently. A lot of the time I have to really explain it to people, and they ask me, oh, do you play it in this chair then? Or is it like a different chair that you get into? And so I think the more and more we do as a team on the pitch, it's going to help to grow our sport off the pitch.
We've only really seen that development with wheelchair rugby and wheelchair basketball in recent years, because competitions, World Cups most notably, were broadcast on BBC. And what that's done for them since has been completely unprecedented. And that's why I'm thinking if we win a World Cup, we start to get that more mainstream recognition, more eyes on the sport. There's no telling where we can go, because I know we're biased, but I think our format of sport, and football more specifically, is far more entertaining than a lot of disability sports out there. I want to move away from international football now. And if you don't mind, I want to talk about the people around you, because no young player does this alone. Behind every player who progresses as quickly as you have, there's usually a support system doing a lot of the work that nobody sees. So things like travel, organization, encouragement, keeping you grounded, helping you handle disappointments. The list goes on and on. And with you, for those that know you certainly, it's obvious how invested your mum, dad, brother, and grandparents are, not just as family members watching the sport, but as people fully behind your journey. How important has your family support been for your development?
It's been pretty invaluable, to be honest, because I literally physically couldn't do anything of what I do without them. My parents were people that found the sport for me in the first place, people that encouraged me to keep going back when I wasn't enjoying it. And then obviously between my mum and dad, they drive me everywhere now, and they always have done. So yeah, I really would be nowhere near where I am today without them, and so I can't really take much credit for it at all because um, yeah, it wouldn't be as it is without them. And then, as you say, my brother as well. Hats off to him. He's got so invested and so involved with the sport, as I'm sure a lot of people know. He does some of the commentary, and he runs a lot of the Aspire stuff and does the podcast for us, and he's been on a few of the WFA podcasts, and he absolutely loves it. And whilst it does help him because it supports his kind of career path in the future, he just does it because he loves it so much. And I sometimes joke around with him that he's more invested in the sport than I am, because he does just absolutely live and breathe it. Like, it's not like he just does it to come and support me. I'll sometimes go and find him and he's watching back an old Powerchair football match, and I'm not even in the room. And that's like an incredible thing that you've got so many people that aren't disabled in any way but just absolutely love the sport. And so yeah, he's a great. And for like, if anyone speaks to him, they'll know that he loves the sport so much. And so yeah, he's always been a good support system in the sense that maybe I don't want to, if I've had a bad game, or it's not, training session's not what I wanted, I might not want to moan to my mum and dad about it, and because they're the ones that have driven me away there, and I don't want to be ungrateful about it. But sometimes Charlie can be helpful in the sense that I can speak to him and just have. I think everyone needs someone that they can speak to freely, and if the voice they're maybe disappointed, be able to speak to someone and say, I'm really unhappy, I'm a bit worried about how I played today and the fact I didn't help my team, or if they're like disappointed about a loss or really happy about a win. It's nice to be able to share it with people. So yeah, my family and have always been a good support system for me. And yeah, even my grandparents, they're always keeping up with it on Facebook, and they absolutely love the Powerchair community.
Yeah, one of the things that really has stuck with me from part one of our podcast is the persistence of your mum. And had it not been for her encouragement for you to go back to that second session in Northampton, we almost certainly wouldn't be sitting here discussing your journey, the successes, the competitions, the traveling, etc. So that's one of the things that kind of prompted me to want to talk about the role of your family. I want to talk about Charlie because he is a huge part of your story. And when I recall some of my most proud, significant, special memories within the sport, he's so often right there alongside me. If I haven't said it on the podcast before, I will say it now. From a dedication, quality, journalistic, commentary, personality perspective, Charlie is genuinely one of the most talented people I've ever met and worked with. And to echo some of your points, what stands out isn't just his ability, it's his drive. He is obsessed with the sport in the best way possible. Traveling, coaching, commentary, social media, podcast, he's fully immersed. And as a non-player myself, he's someone I bounce a lot of ideas off. Commentary has genuinely changed my life but for me, it didn't happen overnight. It took me 4 or 5 years maybe to build the level of confidence and clarity to do it to the standard I do now. Um, and that for me came through a lot of work away from the mic. So I spend a lot of time learning, revising, studying, trying to improve because I've never really been naturally good at anything. Whatever level I've reached has come through effort and probably more luck. Charlie, however, is just one of the most naturally gifted people I've ever met. His journey runs very parallel to yours because he can walk into any environment with minimal, almost reference points, and he's still able to deliver world-class production, commentary, storytelling, and the opportunities that he's had reflect that. Calling major domestic clashes in England. He was, for me, the unsung hero of the EPFA Champions Cup, which we alluded to in part one, and even the World Cup, including the final in Sydney. So he's earned every single one of those through the quality of his work and how serious he takes his craft. What's it like seeing someone so close to you kind of grow into their own path within the sport, not as a player, but someone who's shaping how the sport is seen and heard?
I think it's been amazing because I never feel like the big thing for me is I never wanted to feel like it was a burden for my family, having to drive me around everywhere or come to these events. But now I genuinely don't feel like that at all because they love it. Like my mum's always and my dad, they're watching games when they're not even there. They're like if my mum's taking me for the day or my dad's taking me for the day, I'll get a text from the other one. All that game was very interesting, wasn't it? And it's a game between two completely different teams that I wasn't even involved in. But my whole family sort of just is very involved with the sport now and watches a lot of it. And especially my brother, as you said, to have him there and for him to love it so much, it never feels like I'm dragging him along just for a bit of because he has to. He genuinely wants to come. And like he's just it's amazing. He's incredible, as you said, at what he does. I don't know how he does it. Like I'm sure I've repeated myself a few times on this podcast over the two episodes, but he never seems to do that. He just knows what to say and can come up with the right words at the right moment. So he's always had a skill for that and for public speaking in general. And yeah, I'm just so glad that he's been able to find a path in the sport as well. And I hope that it's kind of a career for him in the future, and it will, whatever he does go on to do, I think this will really benefit him because even if it isn't something directly in Powerchair football, having this experience of top elite football, commentating on big matches, doing social media, doing podcasts, that's exactly kind of what I see him doing in the future. So it's really amazing the opportunities that he's been able to get as a result of me playing as well.
Yeah, to see where he is and what he's doing at 18, 19 years of age, if he's not presenting on Sky Sports, BBC, TNT, or any other major platform of broadcasters in the next 10 years, something has gone terribly wrong along the way because he is more than good enough for any of them now, let alone once he's completed his journalism course at university and he's expanded his CV even further. On that point, you've already experienced a lot in this sport, but you're still at a stage in your life where education, learning, and decisions about the future really matter. And all of that is happening alongside training, travel, camps, competitions, playing at the very highest of level. Football will always be a significant part in your life. I don't want to understate that, but it's not the only thing that defines you. What do you want to pursue academically or professionally alongside your football?
Um, I've got quite a keen interest in economics actually. I'm doing A levels right now, so I'm doing economics alongside maths and chemistry. I'm in my first year of doing that, but that's something I found really interesting. So I think I'll probably end up going to university to study economics. But I know you say football's not the only thing that defines me, but I 100% will be that the club that I'll be playing for would obviously always be a huge factor in where I go. So obviously the the course and like the accessibility are important, but that will definitely be something at the forefront of my mind when I make that decision. So yeah, it's so hard to say right now because at this age there's so many different kind of paths you can go down, whether that's university, going straight into work, apprenticeships, all of these things. But yeah, I don't want to close off any options right now, and I want to try and keep balancing my football and my academics as much as I can.
Well, I can say you're doing it incredibly well, because not many will know that the world class level that you currently perform at within Powerchair football is most definitely matched by your grades within school. So I think you can do whatever you set your mind to. Um, Lastly, I just want to talk about the next generation, because you are an incredible role model for young players coming into the sport. And a lot of them will listen to this. And whether it's realistic or not, they'll look at your journey and think, that is what I want to do. They'll see the moments, the tournaments, the progression, but maybe not some of the things that underpin that. The habits you've built, the mindset you have, how you deal with things like setbacks, and how you conduct yourselves both on and off the court. Um, and for that, I just want to ask you a few questions. Firstly, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given? And as a role model for young players coming through with big ambitions, what advice would you give them?
You have to just love playing as much as you can, especially especially when you're only like when I was 13, 14. It wasn't about just winning as much as that kind of came with it. It's about the only way you're going to really improve is if you're really, really loving it, because then you want to spend all your free time watching it, and you want to spend all your time in your chair just playing. And I'd say, like, the key thing, like, even when we were training, we'd have a break for a drink or to get a snack in inspired training. I would just be knocking the ball against the wall constantly because I just loved having the ball at my bumper, and just I loved the just being in a chair and playing passes and just improving my ball contact. And so yeah, I think that's really important, and to not put too much pressure on yourself, because as you say, maybe people want to try and do what I've done, but I didn't know that this was going to happen back then. So that's the thing, because I never knew this was going to happen. I had no pressure on me. I just said I'll enjoy it and see where it takes me. So I think that's what I would recommend for other people to do as well, and to make their own path rather than trying to that feel that they have to do what someone else did.
Alongside that, advice for players to really love it and find their passion for Powerchair football in those early stages, what do you think they should really be focusing on, technically, tactically, mentally, maybe?
So mentally, I would say definitely to be resilient and not worry if you have a bad game, because I did so much stupid stuff back in the early days, and things where I watch it back now. There's really old games and think, what was I even thinking? But it's all part of the process. I know it's a bit cringy, but it's true. People say you don't lose, you win or you improve, and that is such a true statement. And the cringiest ones are normally true. Um, so you can't see a bad game as a negative thing. You've got to see it as another part in sort of molding you into being the player that you want to be. And then tactically, and I'd probably say watch the best players in your role. If you're a central player, watch Tyler, watch John, then abroad, watch Momo, watch Brian, and then if you're wide players, watch Ed, watch Marcus from the previous years, watch Dylan, and just learn your trade really, really well. Make sure that you really specialize in what you want to be. Make sure you learn your role down to the ground. You know where you want to be, off the ball, on the ball, in possession, out of possession, and just make sure your ball contact is as good as it can be, because it's all well and good knowing where you need to be, but if you don't have that end product, then when the ball gets to you, it doesn't really count for anything. So just make sure you really specialize and you know where you need to be, and you understand patterns of play, and then just capitalize when you get the chances.
No, I think that's fantastic advice. And I think there was elements of advice you provided in part one about testing yourself, getting minutes, playing championship football, sometimes taking a step backwards to take a step forwards, and not being afraid to make mistakes, which I'm sure you will wholeheartedly agree with, because it's almost a cliche, but you learn so much more from mistakes than you do successes.
Yeah, you absolutely do. I think I remember like big losses. I remember my first season at Aspire, we lost 1-0 to Leeds, which is a really big shock result. And then the year after, a title winning year, we lost to Teesside. And I used to get so upset about those games and beat myself up. And I'd sometimes just feel like quitting after those games, and really felt really, really down for 2 or 3 days afterwards, to a point where I didn't want to speak to anyone. But I now realise that that was what I improved from, not you don't improve from 5-0 wins where it's been really a doddle for you. You improve in those really tough moments, because you either crack in those moments or you try and be resilient and make the best of it. So I think, yeah, you literally can't lose. If you see those tough moments as just another way to improve, then there's nothing that can hold you back.
No, I agree completely. Right, Dan, that all but concludes our episode. Before we wrap it up properly, I want to once again finish with another international quickfire round with instinctive answers. You ready?
Ready.
Proudest moment represented England.
Argentina goals.
3 toughest individual opponents you faced.
Pete Winslow for his set piece deliveries, Momo because he just reads the game ridiculously well, and Valentino because he's just the most physical, passionate player I've ever played against.
International opponent that surprised you the most.
Oh, I would say this wasn't very quick fire. My bad. I'd say Fran from Uruguay. He does everything so nonchalantly, but he reads the game really well, and you can't really get much past him.
No, he's certainly a player I'll be looking forward to watching in Argentina. He's so aggressive, so passionate, but that's just the South American footballing culture. Hardest thing about international football compared to club football?
The pressure, the atmosphere.
Yeah, very much so. I asked this of Adam McAvoy when we sat down together for the podcast. I asked him to use one word to describe the players within the England squad, and I'd like to do the same for you. So I'm going to say a name, just one word, okay?
Yeah.
John Balding.
Leader.
Chris Gordon.
Tactical.
Ed Common.
Magic.
Marcus Harrison.
Poker.
Dylan Kelsall.
Power.
Tyler Reeve.
Finesse.
Ethan Fisher.
Passing.
Yeah, I like those. I think both you and Adam used magician for Ed Common. He is magical. And to finish, like we did for part one, Fantasy 4. So you're playing on the wings. If you need to pick a team with 3 international players you've never played alongside before, who are you picking?
I've got to pick Momo. Everyone would. I think, is it one from each country?
No, you can do what you wish. Assuming you're on one wing, just tell me what position.
So no English players.
No English players.
Okay, so I'll go with. I've got to have Momo and Brian in there. I think they're two of the absolute best players in the world. So I think I'd put me on one wing. I think I'll put Momo on the other wing, Brian in the middle, and then who do I want in goal? Actually, you know what? I'll put Brian in goal, Momo in the middle, and then I'll put Valentino on the far wing.
Yeah, I mean, to see the way that France played in the Euros, to use Brian as that kind of sweeper keeper was great to see, and it shows that they're trying to adapt their game and trying to unlock a few more things up the court. I would have done the same, but I'm also been equally impressed with what I've seen with Jordan Dickey when he's featured as a goalkeeper, which is a change we saw at St George's Park and latterly the America's Cup. I'm not saying it to change your mind, but you can see that two of the leading nations within the world within the last 12 months have changed their approach and their tactics, starting with who they play in goal and how their goalkeeper operates. So it's fascinating to see, and hopefully there's a few more unknowns that will come to light in the World Cup that will keep us all on our toes. Dan, that brings us to the end of episode 45 of the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast powered by MK Battery. Thank you again, not just for your time, but your openness and reflection throughout this second part of the conversation to properly unpack the England journey, the pressure, the responsibility, and what comes with representing your country at the highest level. It's been fascinating, and I know a lot of people listening will take a huge amount from this. A huge thank you as ever to everyone listening and supporting the podcast. The response to this two-parter has been incredible, and the messages, feedback, and engagement means so much. And of course, a massive thank you to MK Battery for powering the podcast and for their continued support of Powerchair Football across every level of the game. And lastly, thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much.